Document. Part 1. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays over the bustling streets of downtown Chicago. Among the sea of people rushing to their destinations stood Evelyn Carter, a 72-year-old woman with a quiet dignity that seemed almost out of place amidst the chaos. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her warm brown eyes reflected years of wisdom and kindness. She wore a simple navy blue coat over a floral dress, paired with sturdy black shoes polished to a shine. Evelyn clutched her leather purse tightly as she approached the towering glass doors of First National Trust Bank. Inside the bag was an envelope containing important documents, papers she needed to withdraw money for her granddaughter's tuition. Her granddaughter, Tanya, had worked hard to get accepted into a prestigious university, and Evelyn wanted nothing more than to see her dreams come true. Though her pension didn't stretch far these days, Evelyn had managed to save just enough to cover part of Tanya's expenses. As she stepped inside the bank, the automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The interior was sleek and modern, all polished marble floors and gleaming counters. Rows of chairs lined one side of the room, occupied by customers waiting their turn. Above them, digital screens displayed numbers corresponding to each teller station. The hum of conversation mingled with the occasional beep of machines, creating a symphony of organized activity. Evelyn joined the line at the counter, patiently observing those around her. There were young professionals scrolling through their phones, families discussing plans, and older couples exchanging polite nods. Despite the crowd, there was an underlying tension, a sense that everyone was in a hurry, eager to finish their business and move on with their day. When it was finally Evelyn's turn, she approached a teller window marked Station 3. Behind the counter sat Kyle Dawson, a man in his late 20s with slicked back hair and a perpetually annoyed expression. His name tag glinted under the fluorescent lights, though his demeanor suggested he couldn't care less about customer service. As Evelyn placed her documents on the counter, Kyle barely glanced at her before tapping impatiently on his keyboard. "I need to make a withdrawal," Evelyn said softly, her voice steady, but tinged with nervousness. She opened her purse to retrieve her identification card, fumbling slightly as she searched for the right pocket. Kyle sighed audibly, rolling his eyes. "Ma'am, can you please hurry up? We've got a lot of people waiting." Evelyn froze for a moment, startled by his tone. She forced a small smile and nodded. "Of course, I'm sorry, just give me a second." But Kyle wasn't satisfied. He leaned forward, his arms crossed over his chest. "You know, if you came prepared, this wouldn't be such a hassle. Maybe next time, think ahead." His words hit like a slap, sharp and unexpected. Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks as murmurs rippled through the nearby crowd. Some people pretended not to notice, while others exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few even looked away entirely, unwilling to acknowledge what was happening. Evelyn tried to compose herself, taking a deep breath. "I'm doing my best," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I just need a moment to find my ID." "Well, your moment is wasting everyone else's time," Kyle shot back, his voice rising now. "If you can't handle basic tasks, maybe someone else should do this for you." The words stung deeply, cutting straight to Evelyn's core. For a brief moment she considered walking away, leaving the bank and forgetting about the whole ordeal. But then she thought of Tanya, her bright smile, her determination, her unwavering belief in a better future. "No," Evelyn told herself firmly. "I won't let him win." Before she could respond, however, another voice cut through the tension. Deep, commanding, and impossible to ignore. "Is there a problem here?" All eyes turned toward the source of the interruption. Standing a few feet away was a man unlike anyone else in the room. He was tall and broad-shouldered, exuding confidence with every step he took. His dark sunglasses shielded his eyes, but his chiseled jawline and muscular frame left little doubt about his presence. He wore a leather jacket over a plain white t-shirt, paired with jeans that looked like they belonged on a movie star rather than a regular person. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Kyle seemed taken aback, his earlier bravado faltering under the weight of the stranger's gaze. Finally, Evelyn found her voice. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I'll figure it out." But the man shook his head, stepping closer, until he stood directly beside Evelyn. "No, ma'am," he said, his tone firm yet respectful. "This isn't okay. Not even close." He turned his attention to Kyle, removing his sunglasses to reveal piercing brown eyes. "Listen, kid," he began, his voice calm but laced with authority. "This woman is trying to conduct her business like any other customer. If you have an issue with how long it's taking, maybe you should look in the mirror instead of taking it out on her," Kyle sputtered, clearly caught off guard. I didn't mean—" "You absolutely meant it," the man interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. "And trust me, we both know it. Now apologize or I'll make sure your boss hears about this little display." The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Kyle hesitated for a split second before mumbling something vaguely resembling an apology. By then, another bank employee, a kind-faced woman named Lisa Monroe, had arrived to assist Evelyn. With gentle efficiency, Lisa guided her away from the counter and helped her complete the transaction without further incident. Once everything was settled, Evelyn turned to thank the stranger who had intervened. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice filled with gratitude. "You didn't have to do that." The man smiled, extending a hand. "Name's Marcus Kane," he introduced himself. "And believe me, I did have to do that. Nobody deserves to be treated like garbage. Not today, not ever." Evelyn shook his hand, marveling at the strength in his grip. "Well, Mr. Kane, I appreciate it more than I can express. My name's Evelyn Carter." "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Carter," Marcus replied warmly. "Now, how about we get some fresh air? This place feels a bit suffocating, doesn't it?" Without waiting for an answer, he gestured toward the exit. Evelyn hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Together they walked outside, leaving the sterile confines of the bank behind. As they settled onto a nearby bench, the autumn breeze brushing against their faces, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and curiosity. Who was this man, and why had he gone out of his way to help her? Little did she know, their encounter was only the beginning of something much bigger. Document. Part 2. Evelyn sat on the bench outside the bank, her hands clasped tightly around the envelope containing her withdrawal slip. The crisp autumn air swirled around them, carrying the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby street vendor. Marcus Kane leaned back slightly, his leather jacket creaking softly as he adjusted his position. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Evelyn was still processing what had just happened inside the bank, while Marcus seemed content to let her gather her thoughts. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Kane," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "You didn't have to step in like that." Marcus shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Call me Marcus," he replied. "And trust me, it wasn't a big deal. That guy was way out of line and someone had to say something." Evelyn nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her lap. "Still, it's not every day you meet someone willing to stand up for a stranger. Especially someone like me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus frowned slightly, tilting his head to look at her. "Someone like you?" he repeated, his tone curious but gentle. "What do you mean by that?" Evelyn hesitated, unsure how much to share. She wasn't used to opening up to people she'd just met, especially not someone as imposing as Marcus. But there was something about him, his calm demeanor, his steady gaze, that made her feel safe. After a pause, she sighed and began to speak. "Well," she started, choosing her words carefully, "let's just say I'm not exactly valued these days. People see an old black woman and assume I'm slow or forgetful or out of touch. They don't think twice about treating me like I don't matter." Marcus listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Evelyn paused, he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "That's messed up," he said firmly. "Age doesn't define your worth, and neither does the color of your skin. Anyone who thinks otherwise is just plain Wrong. His words brought a small smile to Evelyn's face, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It's sweet of you to say that, Marcus, but the truth is I've been dealing with this kind of thing for years. It's nothing new. Marcus frowned again, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. That doesn't make it okay, he said. Just because something happens all the time doesn't mean we should accept it. You deserve better than that. Evelyn glanced at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. There was a fire in his eyes, a determination that suggested he wasn't just paying lip service. He genuinely believed what he was saying, and that meant something to her. Thank you, she said after a moment, her voice softer now. It's nice to hear someone say that, even if it doesn't change the world. Marcus chuckled lightly, shaking his head. Maybe not the whole world, he admitted, but maybe one little corner of it, starting with that jerk back there. His light-hearted tone eased some of the tension, and Evelyn found herself smiling more genuinely this time. Well, I suppose you did put him in his place, she said, though I can't imagine he'll be too happy about it. Who cares? Marcus replied with a shrug. If he's got a problem, he can take it up with me. I've dealt with worse. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You seem like the kind of person who's used to handling trouble, she observed. Am I right? Marcus grinned, leaning back against the bench again. You could say that, he said cryptically. Let's just say I've spent a lot of time around people who think they're untouchable. Turns out they're not. Evelyn nodded, sensing there was more to his story than he was letting on. But instead of pressing him for details, she decided to shift the conversation. So what brings you to Chicago? She asked. Are you visiting family, or maybe here for work? Marcus hesitated briefly before answering. Work, mostly, he said. I'm in town wrapping up a project. Nothing too exciting, just filming some scenes for a movie. Evelyn's eyes widened slightly. A movie? Are you an actor? Not exactly, Marcus replied with a chuckle. I'm more behind the scenes, stunts, action sequences, that kind of thing. Keeps me busy, but I enjoy it. That sounds fascinating, Evelyn said, her curiosity piqued. I've always admired people who can pull off those kinds of stunts. Must take a lot of skill. It does, Marcus agreed. But it's not all glamorous, believe me. Long hours, lots of bruises. He trailed off with a grin. Anyway, enough about me. Tell me more about you, Mrs. Carter. What's your story? Evelyn smiled faintly, touched by his interest. There's not much to tell, really, she said modestly. I'm retired now, but I used to teach elementary school. My husband passed away a few years ago, and my granddaughter Tanya is the light of my life. She's going to college soon, studying to become a doctor. That's amazing, Marcus said sincerely. Sounds like she takes after her grandmother. Evelyn laughed softly, waving a hand dismissively. Oh, Tanya is far smarter than I ever was, but she works hard and she deserves every opportunity she gets. Marcus nodded approvingly. Good for her, and good for you, supporting her like this. Family means everything. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the world go by. Cars honked in the distance, pedestrians hurried past, and the occasional gust of wind sent leaves tumbling across the sidewalk. Despite the noise and activity, there was a sense of calm between them, a quiet understanding that transcended their differences in age and background. Eventually, Marcus stood up, stretching his arms above his head. Listen, Mrs. Carter, he said, turning to face her. I've got some free time today and I'd like to help you with whatever you need. Whether it's sorting out paperwork or figuring out how to deal with jerks like that guy back there, consider me your backup. Evelyn blinked in surprise, caught off guard by his offer. That's very kind of you, Marcus, she said, but I couldn't possibly ask you to do that. You've already done so much. You're not asking, Marcus countered with a grin. I'm offering. Besides, I've got a friend who's great with tech stuff. If there's anything shady going on with that bank, he'll sniff it out in no time. Evelyn hesitated, weighing his words. On one hand, she didn't want to impose on a stranger no matter how generous he seemed. On the other hand, the idea of uncovering the truth and potentially helping others who might have been treated unfairly was undeniably appealing. All right, she said finally, nodding slowly. If you're sure. I am, Marcus replied, his tone firm but warm. Now, let's grab some coffee and talk strategy. There's a cafe just down the block. With that, he extended a hand to help her up. Evelyn took it, feeling a renewed sense of hope as they walked side by side toward the cafe. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. Document, Part 3. The cafe was warm and inviting, with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Evelyn and Marcus chose a quiet corner table near the window, where they could talk without being disturbed. The barista greeted them with a smile as they placed their orders. Evelyn opted for a simple black coffee, while Marcus went for an espresso. As they waited for their drinks, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had spent years avoiding conflict, preferring to keep her head down and focus on her family. But now, sitting across from Marcus, she found herself considering possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. Once their coffees arrived, Marcus leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. All right, Mrs. Carter, he began, his tone serious but encouraging. Tell me everything you know about that bank. Anything unusual, no matter how small. Evelyn took a sip of her coffee, gathering her thoughts. Well, she started, slowly. I've been banking at First National Trust for over 30 years. Back when my husband was alive, we both used their services. It was different then. The staff was friendly and things ran smoothly. But lately, she paused, shaking her head. Lately, it feels like they're trying to make life harder for people like me. Marcus nodded, urging her to continue. Go on, he said. What's changed? For one thing, the fees, Evelyn explained. They've gone up so much in the past few years. Every time I look at my statement, there's another charge I don't understand. And when I ask questions, no one gives me a straight answer. They just say it's standard policy. That doesn't sound right, Marcus muttered, frowning. What else? The service has gotten worse too, Evelyn added. It used to be that if you needed help, someone would actually assist you. Now it's all about rushing you out the door. Like today with Kyle. He wasn't the first rude employee I've dealt with either. Most of them act like they can't wait to get rid of us older folks. Marcus scribbled notes on a napkin, his brow furrowed in concentration. Anything specific stand out? Names? Dates? Transactions? Evelyn thought for a moment before nodding. There was one incident last month. I tried to transfer some money to Tanya's account, but the transaction failed. When I called customer service, they told me I'd entered the wrong details, even though I know I didn't. It took weeks to sort it out, and by then I'd racked up late fees because the payment wasn't processed on time. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's not just bad service, it's predatory. Sounds like they're targeting seniors who might not notice or fight back. Evelyn sighed heavily, her shoulders slumping. I guess I'm not surprised. People assume we won't complain. Even if we do, who's going to listen? Not anymore, Marcus said firmly. We're going to dig deeper and find out what's really going on. If they're cheating you, they're probably cheating others too. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed a number. After a few rings, a cheerful voice answered on the other end. Hey, Alex, Marcus said. Got a minute? I need your help with something. While Marcus spoke to his friend, Evelyn sipped her coffee, feeling a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, she was grateful for Marcus's determination to help her. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the fear of stirring up trouble. What if they uncovered something dangerous? What if the bank retaliated? When Marcus hung up, he turned back to Evelyn with a reassuring smile. Alex is on board, he said. He's a tech genius. Can hack into just about anything. He'll start looking into the bank's records tonight. Evelyn blinked in surprise. Hack? She repeated, her voice tinged with alarm. Isn't that illegal? Marcus chuckled lightly, holding up a hand. Relax, Mrs. Carter. Alex knows how to stay under the radar. We're not breaking any laws. We're just gathering information. Once we have proof, we'll hand it over to the authorities. Evelyn nodded hesitantly. still unsure but willing to trust Marcus. "All right," she said softly. "But what happens next? If we find something, I mean." "We expose it," Marcus replied confidently. "And we make sure everyone knows what's been happening. You're not alone in this, Evelyn. There are probably dozens, if not hundreds, of people being taken advantage of. Together, we can shine a light on it." Over the next hour, they discussed their plan in detail. Marcus suggested reaching out to local media outlets once they had enough evidence, believing that public pressure would force the bank to take action. Evelyn agreed, though she admitted she wasn't comfortable being the face of the movement. "I don't want attention," she said. "I just want justice." "You'll get both," Marcus assured her. "But don't worry, I'll handle most of the talking. You focus on sharing your story when the time comes." As they left the cafe, Marcus promised to keep Evelyn updated on Alex's progress. Before parting ways, he gave her his number, insisting she call him if anything unusual happened. "Stay safe, okay?" he said, his tone protective. "If anyone tries to intimidate you, let me know immediately." Evelyn thanked him again, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt like someone truly cared about her well-being. Later that evening, Alex Rivera sat hunched over his computer in his dimly lit apartment. A wiry man in his early 30s with messy dark hair and glasses. Perched on the edge of his nose, Alex was known among his friends as a wizard with technology. Within minutes of accessing the bank's internal systems, he discovered anomalies that confirmed Marcus's suspicions. "They're siphoning funds," Alex muttered to himself, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Small amounts at first, barely noticeable, but over time it adds up. Thousands of dollars disappearing from senior citizens' accounts." He dug deeper, uncovering a network of offshore accounts linked to high-ranking executives at First National Trust. The scheme was cleverly designed to exploit loopholes in banking regulations, making it nearly impossible for victims to trace the missing funds. Alex whistled low under his breath. "This is big," he murmured. "Really big." By midnight, he had compiled a detailed report complete with screenshots, transaction logs, and names of key players involved in the fraud. Exhausted but satisfied, he sent the file to Marcus with a quick message. "You were right, this place is rotten to the core." When Marcus received the email early the next morning, he wasted no time contacting Evelyn. "We've got them," he said when she answered the phone. "Solid proof of corruption. Now we just need to figure out the best way to use it." Evelyn listened intently, her hands trembling slightly as she absorbed the news. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now," Marcus replied, his tone resolute, "we prepare for battle." Document. Part 4. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity for Evelyn and Marcus. Armed with the evidence Alex had uncovered, they began piecing together a plan to expose the corruption at First National Trust Bank. It wasn't going to be easy. Taking on a powerful institution meant facing resistance from people who wouldn't hesitate to protect their interests, but neither of them was willing to back down. Marcus arranged a meeting with Patricia Simmons, a retired journalist he knew through mutual friends. Pat was in her late 60s, with sharp gray eyes and an air of authority that came from decades of investigative reporting. She lived in a cozy apartment filled with books, newspapers, and framed awards from her career. When Marcus and Evelyn arrived, she greeted them warmly but wasted no time getting down to business. "So," Pat said, leaning forward in her armchair, "what's this about?" Marcus mentioned something about a bank scam. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, glancing at Marcus for reassurance. He gave her an encouraging nod, signaling that it was okay to speak. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn began recounting her experiences: the rude employees, the skyrocketing fees, the mysterious charges on her account. As she spoke, Pat listened intently, jotting notes in a small notebook. When Evelyn finished, Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Pat the documents Alex had compiled. The evidence was damning: proof of hidden fees, unauthorized transfers, and offshore accounts linked to top executives. Pat's expression darkened as she scrolled through the files. "This is big," she said finally, setting the phone down. If we play our cards right, we can blow this wide open. Over the next few hours, the three of them mapped out a strategy. Pat suggested starting small by reaching out to other victims, encouraging them to come forward with their stories. Strength in numbers, she explained. The more people who speak up, the harder it will be for the bank to deny responsibility. Evelyn agreed, though the thought of confronting strangers made her nervous. I'll do whatever it takes, she said firmly. But I'm not used to being visible. What if no one believes me? They will, Marcus assured her. And if they don't, we'll make sure they hear the truth loud and clear. With Pat's guidance, Evelyn drafted a letter explaining what had happened to her and inviting others to share their experiences. They printed copies and distributed them around senior centers, community boards, and local churches. At first, responses trickled in slowly, a few emails here, a phone call there, but soon, the floodgates opened. Dozens of elderly individuals reached out, each with their own tale of mistreatment or financial exploitation. One woman named Gloria recounted how her life savings had dwindled due to exorbitant fees she couldn't explain. Another man, Harold, described being pressured into signing documents he didn't understand, only to discover later that his account had been drained. Their stories painted a chilling picture of systemic abuse targeting some of society's most vulnerable members. As word spread, so did public outrage. Local news outlets picked up the story, running segments about the alleged misconduct at First National Trust Bank. Social media buzzed with hashtags like Justice for Seniors and Irijas Bank Scandal Exposed. Protesters gathered outside branches across Chicago, holding signs that read, "Stop preying on the elderly" and "Honesty over greed." Despite the growing momentum, Evelyn remained cautious. She attended rallies and spoke at meetings, but always stayed close to Marcus, drawing strength from his presence. He in turn acted as both protector and cheerleader, ensuring she felt supported every step of the way. However, the fight wasn't without its challenges. One evening, as Evelyn returned home from a community gathering, she found a note taped to her front door. Written in block letters, it read, "Drop this or face consequences." Her hands trembled as she stared at the message, fear gripping her chest. For a moment, she considered doing exactly what it demanded, walking away and pretending none of this had ever happened. But then she thought of all the people who had joined her cause, trusting her to lead the charge. She couldn't abandon them now. Instead, Evelyn called Marcus immediately. When he arrived, he took one look at the note and his jaw tightened. "This isn't a coincidence," he said grimly. "Someone knows we're onto them." "What should I do?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You keep fighting," Marcus replied without hesitation. "But you also stay safe. From now on, I'll escort you wherever you go. And if anything else happens, anything, you tell me right away." Evelyn nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. Though the threat lingered in the back of her mind, she refused to let it silence her. Meanwhile, Pat worked tirelessly to build a case against the bank. She interviewed victims, analyzed financial records, and wrote scathing articles exposing the depth of the corruption. Her work caught the attention of federal regulators, who launched an official investigation. Executives at First National Trust scrambled to contain the damage, issuing vague apologies and promising reforms, but the tide had already turned against them. In the midst of the chaos, Evelyn found herself growing stronger. Each speech she gave, each interview she participated in, chipped away at the fear that had once held her back. She realized that her voice mattered, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced for too long. One afternoon, as she stood beside Marcus at another rally, Evelyn looked out over the sea of faces and felt a surge of pride. People, of all ages, races, and backgrounds, had come together to demand accountability. They weren't just fighting for justice, they were proving that change was possible when ordinary people stood united. "We've come so far," Marcus said quietly, noticing the look of determination on her face. "But there's still work to do." Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining with resolve. "Then let's finish what we started," she replied. "Together. Document." Part 5. The final showdown came on a chilly morning in late November. The city council had called an emergency meeting to address the growing scandal surrounding First National Trust Bank. News vans lined the streets outside the municipal building. Their satellite dishes pointed skyward like metallic flowers. Reporters jostled for position, microphones and cameras at the ready, eager to capture every word of what was sure to be a historic event. Inside the packed auditorium, Evelyn sat in the front row alongside Marcus, Pat, and several other victims who had come forward. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white from the effort of staying calm. She wore her best outfit, a navy blue dress with a matching cardigan, and carried the quilt she had stitched years ago, a symbol of her resilience. Beside her, Marcus leaned forward slightly, his sunglasses tucked into his jacket pocket, his expression focused and alert. As the meeting began, the room fell silent. Council members took their seats at a long wooden table, while representatives from the bank, including its CEO Richard Langston, sat stiffly across from them. Langston was a tall man with slicked back hair and an expensive suit, but his usual air of confidence seemed shaken. He glanced nervously at the crowd, clearly aware that all eyes were on him. Patricia Simmons opened the proceedings, her voice steady and commanding as she addressed the council. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "today we are here to discuss allegations of systemic corruption and exploitation at First National Trust Bank. Over the past few weeks, countless individuals have come forward with stories of hidden fees, unauthorized transactions, and outright theft. We have gathered irrefutable evidence proving these claims, and it is time for accountability." She gestured toward Evelyn, signaling her to stand. With Marcus's encouragement, Evelyn rose slowly, clutching her notes in one hand. For a moment, she hesitated, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Then she looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some angry, some hopeful, and found her courage. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she began, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each word. "I am 72 years old, and I have been a customer of First National Trust Bank for over 30 years. In that time, I have watched this institution change, from a place where people were treated with respect to one that preys on its most vulnerable clients." Evelyn recounted her experience at the bank, describing how Kyle Dawson had humiliated her and how she had struggled to understand the mounting fees eating away at her savings. She spoke about the emotional toll it had taken, not just on her, but on others like her. "We trusted this bank," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "and they betrayed us." When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Tears streamed down Evelyn's cheeks as she returned to her seat, Marcus patting her shoulder gently. "You did great," he whispered. Next, Pat presented the evidence Alex had uncovered, projecting documents onto a large screen for everyone to see. The room gasped audibly as transaction logs, offshore account details, and internal communications revealed the full extent of the scheme. Langston shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead as the damning proof unfolded before him. Finally, it was time for the council to question Langston directly. One member after another grilled him, demanding answers about the fraudulent activities and the executives involved. Langston stammered and evaded, trying desperately to deflect blame, but the evidence was too overwhelming. By the end of the session, even his own legal team looked defeated. Outside the building, reporters swarmed Evelyn and Marcus as they emerged. Cameras flashed, and questions flew fast and furious. "Mrs. Carter, how does it feel to take on such a powerful institution?" one reporter asked. Evelyn paused, composing herself before responding. "It feels like justice," she said simply. "Not just for me, but for everyone who has been wronged. No one should have to endure what we've gone through." Marcus stood. Beside her, his presence a quiet but powerful reminder of their partnership. When the media attention became too much, he guided Evelyn away from the crowd, shielding her from the chaos. They walked together in silence for a while, letting the cool autumn air clear their heads. Later that week, federal authorities announced arrests, not just of Langston, but of several high-ranking officials implicated in the fraud. First National Trust Bank was shut down pending further investigation, and plans were made to redistribute its assets to compensate victims. The news sent shockwaves through the financial world, sparking calls for stricter regulations and greater transparency. For Evelyn, the victory was bittersweet. While she was proud of what they had achieved, she couldn't help but think of all the lives that had been disrupted by the bank's greed. Still, she found solace in knowing that their fight had inspired others to stand up against injustice. As Marcus prepared to leave Chicago and return to Los Angeles, Evelyn invited him to her home for one last visit. Over tea and homemade cookies, they reflected on everything they had been through. "I never imagined I'd meet someone like you," Evelyn said, smiling warmly. "You changed my life, Marcus." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "You changed. Mine too, Evelyn. You reminded me why it's important to fight for what's right." Before he left, Evelyn handed him the quilt she had brought to the meeting. "A small token of gratitude," she explained, "to thank you for everything." Marcus accepted it, his eyes softening. "I'll treasure it always," he said. "And remember, you're stronger than you think. Don't ever forget that." As he drove off, Evelyn stood on her porch watching until his car disappeared from view. Though their paths might never cross again, she knew their friendship would stay with her forever. And as she turned back inside, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle may have ended, but the lessons it taught her would guide her for the rest of her days.